Okay, thanks everyone for being here today. Looks like we've got a pretty good turnout this morning. Um, we're very excited for the workshop today and to talk with Dan Waldkirch about sync licensing. I'm on here with Rebecca Trujillo Vest, also from Pandion Music Foundation.
Hi, hi everybody. Good to see you. Good to be here.
Hello. I'm just going to do a little introduction to Pandion as usual, as many of you are already familiar with. You could all probably be ambassadors for us at this point, those who have come to these workshops regularly, because I do this every week. But Pandion Music Foundation is a nonprofit, global nonprofit. Our platform is mostly based online. We do have in-person events in LA sometimes as well. But we run these workshops once a week on Wednesdays. And the purpose of the workshops are to help break down the barriers between industry professionals and emerging or indie artists, to kind of help shift the music scene a bit and have free flow of information and education, more accessible for up and coming artists, which I think is lacking in today's industry. And we also have Pandion Unplugged on Tuesdays at 9 a.m. Pacific time, which is a music community wellness live stream that we have on our Facebook and Instagram pages. So you can tune in at 9 a.m. on Tuesdays for that. And that's trying to fill the gap of wellness for musicians, and mental health support for musicians, which is also lacking in the industry, we've found. And so far, that community has been great, and we're building that on our creators circle as well, which is a private Facebook group. If you want to join that, you're welcome to. Um, so those are our main programs for Pandion, and we've just enjoyed so much having different mentors on each week, whether it's for Pandion Unplugged or these workshops, and meeting different people from all areas of the music industry and helping to make it more accessible for up and coming artists to connect with professionals in the industry. So thank you, Dan, for being here today. We're so excited to have you and talk about finding the sweet spot in sync, which we're very excited about. We also had a couple submissions I had posted on our Pandion Creator Circle, and took a couple submissions of music from people for the workshop today. So Dan might refer to those as well, which will be exciting to do that. And yeah, anything else I forgot, Rebecca, before I depart?
No, you pretty much covered it all, and we'll just keep the conversation going, and maybe one day we'll pick one of you to lead the workshop.
Yeah, that would be
Especially the
fun.
ones that have been coming. Yeah, that would be.
That would be very fun. So just to give a little background on Dan, Dan has worked at Crucial Music since 2010, overseeing nearly everything on the artist side of the business. A classically trained musician and experienced producer, Dan often serves as a translator between Crucial's supervisor clients and its roster of talent, which sounds like a really cool job. Um, and Dan, maybe you could give a little more just about what you do with Crucial and how you got to that position with them, and just how you got to where you are in the music industry right now.
Sure. Yeah. Hi, everybody. I see a couple of familiar people. I see Peter and John and Mary there.
Nice.
And I'm sure more people on the next page, which I'm afraid to scroll over to because I won't get back. Um, basically, Crucial was my first job out of music school, and I was just lucky to I don't know, kind of start at the bottom there, and it's a very small company, so I've just essentially it's just four of us there. So we have our CEO Tanvi, um, my coworker Joy, who handles a lot of PRO stuff. We have a salesperson, and then me, who I do basically all the music reviewing. I kind of manage the whole catalog as far as like all the, the actual music that's coming in and out, all the data. I kind of represent us for the PROs and kind of represent the artists. I do a lot of bugging the PROs to make sure everybody gets paid. Yeah, I mean, I guess most relevant to you guys is that just I do all the music reviewing, and I apologize to anybody whose music I've rejected. We're very, very picky, but we're gonna kind of get into all sorts of stuff about that. But yeah, just got started there and just been there ever since. I love it there. It's like a great group of people, and I don't know. I've never had any reason to leave,
Well,
so I'm still here.
that's great. That's so good to hear when companies have built a good team and yeah, and when you can stay somewhere for a long time, that's so lovely. Nice. Well, you're welcome to just jump in however you'd like to.
Yeah, so
And then also before we, sorry, just to quickly
sure.
remind people that questions throughout are totally fine. So just drop in the chat and we'll get to them when Dan is ready. But just feel free to drop them in the chat or raise your virtual hand if you want to come on the screen.
Yeah, so I got this little PowerPoint, so I probably won't be able to see the chat, but Jordan said she can call out any relevant questions here. So my talk is called Finding the Sweet Spot in Sync. And Jordan asked me to put together a little talk and said I could talk about whatever I wanted. And I thought back to over the past couple years, I've been doing a lot of these panels where I'm listening to music, giving critiques, kind of that kind of thing. And one thing that I found happening a lot is when artists have music that is produced very, very well, everything's kind of there, but they're having one of two problems, which is that either their music is too generic or it's too specific for sync. So I started thinking about this sort of spectrum where those are kind of the extremes. And aside from production, which is always going to be probably the number one reason stuff gets rejected, I would say the number two and three is these two extremes where music is kind of too generic for us to take or too specific. So my talk is sort of how to sort of calibrate your music to be somewhere in the middle of that. Hopefully get you a few less rejections and maybe lead to some placements down the road. So these are it's a little bit more big picture than maybe some of the other workshops you guys have had here. So a little bit about Crucial itself. I kind of talked about my job there, but we were founded in 2006, so I started pretty soon after the company itself was founded. Um, we're a non-exclusive library. We've got about 15,000 songs. We've kind of evened out at that number. Um, it's fairly small as far as music libraries go, but we found that we're able to fill most needs with that, and tracks are always kind of coming in and out. We have sort of a custom music division, which to be honest, we don't use that much. It's really for very specialized projects that we can't really handle with our main catalog. Um, for example, if a client needs some lyrics with the brand name in it or something like that, we basically built this infrastructure for us to run those projects and kind of make it easy for everybody. One thing that's new that we just started doing is accepting cover songs. And we're really still trying to build up our catalog of covers at the moment, and kind of get the word out with our clients that we're representing covers now. Essentially, we're representing just the master side of it. So if you had a cover song signed with us, we would rep your master, and then the client is still responsible for clearing the publishing and songwriting side of it. Um, so just to give you kind of an honest kind of view of our company, I would say there's some things we're good at and not so good at. Things we're good at, transparency. We have a lot of tools on our site. If you create an account and have some music with us, you'll see pretty extensive reporting on everything. And one thing we have that I don't think anybody else has is we have this page called View Pitch Activity, which essentially you can see every time your song is pitched, where it's pitched to, the date that it's pitched. And obviously that can be good just because it's an encouraging thing to see, but also we think it just kind of lets people make informed decisions about their tracks, you know, whether they want to keep the tracks with us if they're having a lot of activity there, or if they're not, then, you know, you might have an idea that it might work out better somewhere else, something like that. So um, communication, I think we're really good at. If you email the company, it's going to go straight to me. If you email any of the main emails, or you can just email me at dan@crucialmusic.com. And I try to basically clear out my email every day, so you'll usually get a response same day, and people seem to appreciate that, I hope. And then relationships, as you guys probably know, this is a really relationship heavy business, and basically our entire business is built on our CEO Tanvi, just her personality, to be honest. She's a very, very, you know, warm and bubbly person, and people just like doing business with her. That's how we've been successful this whole time. And you know, that's kind of our bread and butter there. Things we're not so good at, we're very small, we're very picky. If you have a ton of music, it's going to take us a very, very long time to get through it. I would say, so as I mentioned, I do all the music review. I've got about close to 2,000 tracks to review in my queue right now. It's going to take several months for me to review it. There is a very long processing stage. And so it's probably going to take you anywhere from 6 to 9 months to get something from submission to in the catalog and pitched. And you know, we're trying to get through this backlog, but we're not terribly successful at the moment. So just kind of trying to set expectations there. Um, and let's see. These Google slides are like not always working for me. So, oh wait, there we go. Yeah, and then I already kind of went through what my job is there. And just, you know, on top of that, personally, I'm a musician. I write musical theater. I've done a couple musicals in the last few years, and weirdly, I've gotten into this niche of writing music for haunted houses and escape rooms. So, which is kind of a weird LA scene that I'm very passionate about and a part of, and yeah, I've you know, I've also gotten a number of placements of maybe 50 or 60 over the years, just kind of just the fact that I'm in the office is obviously a kind of an inside track for me. But you know, I know a fair amount about the kind of the artist experience of how that all works. So yeah, I think that's that. Um, it doesn't ever want to move forward with my slides for some reason. So what does this talk about? I'm gonna try and get through this. I feel like I may have overwritten this, so I apologize if I go through everything very fast. But yeah, so again, it's just not doing, it's not going to the next thing. Okay, there we go. So this is going to be about sort of finding this appealing balance in your music, hopefully a lucrative kind of balance here. The main kind of idea we're going to talk about is this sort of spectrum between too generic versus too unique. I would say this is, again, aside from production, this is going to be the biggest issue for most people. Like, this is just one of the most common reasons I reject things. Um, Kind of lesser important things, music being too dated versus being too new or too cutting edge. We'll talk about a little bit. And then this mostly applies to lyrics, I would say, but too broad versus too specific, and kind of where is that line, and you know, how can you kind of calibrate your music there? Um, and then at the end, we're going to listen to a few submissions. Definitely, if Jordan ever posts submissions, you guys should take advantage of that. I was ready to talk about more tracks, but the three people that submitted will each get some good time, and hopefully you can kind of see my thought process when listening to those things. What this talk is not about, it's not about production. You know, I do have a background in that. I have a degree in audio engineering or whatever, but I'm not a professional in any sense, and there's other people that are a lot more qualified on that. So we're going to kind of stick to these big picture ideas. None of this is going to be hard rules. there are tracks that do everything right and still get rejected, and then there are tracks that kind of break all the rules that I'm kind of mentioning, and we'll still take them if there's something about them that's just really cool or interesting. So these are really just kind of things to think about. And finally, I'm not going to tell you what type of music you should be making. I'm really a believer in the fact you should make the music you want to make, and if something happens to work for sync, that's great. But if it's not, I think everything has value in terms of just expression or what you're interested in, that kind of thing. So sometimes I'll do these panels where I'll give people notes and they'll want to just change some core thing about their sound, just to make it a little bit more applicable to sync. And, that always makes me a little bit sad, but yeah, I always think you guys should be doing what you actually care about. And, hopefully if you have some music that kind of fits into what I'm talking about, that you go and submit it. Okay, so the two kind of main theses I'll start with, that I want to sort of argue is, number one, the sweet spot we're aiming for is mostly familiar with one or two unique elements. So what that kind of means is, I think you guys understand what music for sync generally sounds like, where you're always going to be aiming for what's popular in terms of production and trends. Everything is kind of in this mainstream line, and you're trying to kind of capitalize on what's going on in music. But what I'm kind of arguing here is that you need that, but you also do need one or two little things that either show off your own voice or is something that is unique about you, that I'm not going to hear anywhere else. And again, these are really small things. So it could be anything from like an interesting instrument that's highlighted that's, might not be used that often in the genre, or it could be some kind of quirk of your voice. There's people that just like pronounce things in an interesting way. These things are very, very small. But those are the things that are going to take you from, potentially getting something signed, and maybe you'll get on a playlist or something for a client. But those little tweaks are going to be what actually gets you a placement, and are going to help you stick out from those playlists. And the second kind of thesis here, on our spectrum between too generic versus too unique, vastly more songs are rejected for being too generic. I would say it's 10 to 1. Um, and if it sounds like a very low bar to just add in like a one or two little twists, if it sounds like that's not really doing much, just know that, I listen to hundreds of tracks a day, and the vast majority of people don't even have that one or two little things. So that's kind of what I'm trying to argue, is that, you want to be doing everything you're supposed to be doing, making, just great, pop music or whatever you're doing. But you're going to need these little tweaks to it, and that's what's going to get you to this kind of sweet spot that we're talking about. Okay, so this the top of this slide here. It says, "I don't sound like anyone," and this is sort of a triggering phrase to me, because it's something that people will put on their submissions. We have a little field that you fill out that says, who do I sound like? It's called like style alike, and you're supposed to put in some bands that you sound like. Um, and people will put in, I don't sound like anybody. And there's two groups of people that do this. One is people whose music is so generic that I can't really identify any particular influence. Um, and they don't really sound like anyone. And they're right when they say that. And that causes, a lot of issues for them. And the other people are people who, more than you'd think, I get submissions of music that genuinely doesn't sound like any music I've ever heard in my life. And so they say, I don't sound like anybody. And again, they're right about it, but I'll let you be the judge of if you think that'll work well in sync. So here's kind of this spectrum that we are talking about here. On the left side, we have music that's too generic. And the problem with it is that it has no real identity. And the problem with a song having no identity is we have no way to bring it up in a search and kind of get your music to the client because there's nothing we can really latch onto. And there's a number of ways that people do this. I would say the most often there's submissions that they are just blending too many influences. They sound like 10 different bands, but not even enough like one in particular that I could put that into the metadata. A few points from now, we'll talk about rock music in general is really notoriously like we get a lot of submissions that are just these kind of blurry mix of like every rock band that's ever existed. And not only that, but it's like it doesn't sound like anybody, but it also doesn't sound like you either because it doesn't have these kind of unique elements where you're kind of adding your own voice to it. Um, Similarly, blending genres. So there's sort of an unfortunate side to this, which is that as a listener, and just people that enjoy music and enjoy the art form, we all love blending genres, and it's something that pushes things forward. It's really always interesting to hear, but it can be very limiting in sync because the way that opportunities work, usually it is either one of two things. It is a client asking for a replacement for a more expensive track, and so they'll look for something specific. They'll look for, we need a track that sounds like, the Beatles, Let It Be, or whatever. And then the second thing is they might just ask us for, we need a bunch of pop country tracks. And so if your track is like and they can be pretty adjacent genres, but if you have like a pop country track that has like a bluegrass, mandolin solo or something like that, or it has like, a trap beat in it, like we had this kind of bro country trend, in the 2010s or whatever. Those are things that, again, like blending genres is good in some ways, but it's probably going to make it more difficult for us in a lot of ways. We need, basically, we need pretty clear ways to describe your music if we're going to pitch it to people. Um, and the thing to kind of think about is like what type of requests will bring up your song. And so you have to be pretty accurate and pretty I'm trying to think of what the word, not harsh on yourself, but you especially when you're making these submissions, there are people that will put in, I sound like these 20 different artists, and they're people that they want to sound like, or they are influenced by people they like, but they're not actually what you sound like. So you need to kind of think about like what is an email that we would get from a client that we're going to be putting together a pitch for that is going to bring up your song. And again, with these tracks that are much more on the generic side, um, they're just not clear enough like what they are in order to include them in a pitch, if that makes any sense. As I said, rock is really um, notoriously difficult for this, not just because rock is less in demand for sync right now. It's not on the charts. It's like the rock that's being used has to have a specific time and place in terms of like the story it's being used in, that kind of thing. But I can't tell you how many submissions I get that are, you know, it's a four-piece rock band where it's drums, guitar, bass, and a singer who's like, singer's got this like kind of baritone middle range voice, and they're singing rock songs about rock song topics, and that's as far as I can really describe it. Um, and they don't sound like a band that I can really put my finger on, and there's just like nothing for me to anchor onto, and so those tracks are getting rejected, 90% of the time. Um, again, really what I'm looking for when I listen to these songs is a clear application, whether that's in like a TV show, a movie, or an ad, or a video game, or something like that. And if I can't think of like with these really generic songs, it's like I can almost think of 1,000 applications, but none of them are very clear, very specific. And if I don't have that clear idea of what it's going to be used in, I'm going to reject it. Even if it's, even if it's a well-written song, it's produced really great, and it's kind of hitting all the things. Um, the last thing, and I think this is a pretty important thing, on this kind of too generic side of the spectrum, the effect that this has, if you're not really including any of those unique elements, is that it'll sound like it was made for sync. And that's something that people can sniff out very, very easily. Um, the easiest the easiest way to sniff it out, to be honest, is lyrics. When it's just lyrics that are just, it'll be like a party song where all the lyrics are just like, let's go, let's have a fun, let's have a great night. Everybody's, whatever. You kind of you know it when you hear it. And it sounds like it was basically just made to make money or, capitalize on something or other. And in general, it's just not cool. And something I'll get into as this goes on, this idea of tracks that are cool is very important, at least to our clients. It might be different for, different types of libraries. On the other side, we have music that's too unique and specific. And the problem is here is that there's no versatility to it. Um, you guys, I'm sure you kind of have an idea of the types of music we're talking about. Um, this has the actual opposite problem, which is that when you hear it, there is a very specific application for it. But the question is, will that ever come? So, for example, I just reviewed a track the other day that's called "I Want a Gelato." And it was a track about literally wanting, to go out and get some gelato. It was like a very cute track. It was really well written, really well produced. Um, but there's only really one situation where that's going to be used, which is like some kind of storyline about something, a character going out to get gelato. But the problem with that is even if you were to imagine this hypothetical show where it has a scene of a character going out and getting gelato, they're not going to want to use that track because, part of the reason that music is used in movies and TV is that it adds a layer of complexity, some kind of different angle or, emotion than is what's happening on screen. If you had this scene where somebody is going out and getting gelato and you have a song about that, it's not adding anything. It's very on the nose. Again, that's not cool. That's not what supervisors are looking for. Um, they're really looking for a lot of times they're looking for some sort of juxtaposition with what's going on screen, where it's not literally describing, the song isn't literally describing what's happening. It's adding another emotional take on it, something that just adds some kind of depth to the scene. Let's see. Oh, well, it just went past my last point there. But again, my last point kind of here doesn't mean that you shouldn't make this kind of stuff. I am, you know, I'm a lifelong like metalhead experimental music guy. I listen to all sorts of stuff that has basically no commercial application. And again, just because it won't work in sync doesn't mean you shouldn't make it. It's just not the right kind of venue for it. Um, okay. Okay. So this next part, this is something that I've run into constantly over the entire time I've been doing this. People really don't know their music well. They don't know, again, like kind of what they sound like, but they don't know where they fit in this whole kind of musical landscape, and I think that's very important. Um, for music to sound really cool and interesting, it has to have some sort of cultural like context to it. And this is very abstract and it's hard for me to describe, so I apologize if I don't get it across well. But if you imagine, you guys have probably seen online, they have these like maps of like all music where it's like these bubbles where it's like there's a big bubble for rock, and then next to that you have like, branching off of that, you have like alt rock and punk and progressive rock, that kind of thing. And within each of those styles, there is, each of those represents like a tradition and kind of a branching path of this music where it's like it has kind of a time to it and it has a place to it where, if you think about any great rock band, kind of what they grew out of and what came after them. And again, if we're talking about these very generic tracks like rock in particular that we get, um, some of it just doesn't come across like it has any real place. It's not really anchored in any time or like artistic tradition, if that makes sense. For example, if you go to like an art museum or something, any piece of art that you see is gonna have its place in some sort of path, if it's like impressionism or whatever, realism, something like that. Um, and when your music is too generic, it doesn't really sound like it is anywhere or something like that. This is kind of the abstract part, but it's something that I think people can kind of tell. And I guess it has that effect of just not really being cool or interesting. The other place this happens a lot is pop music, where it's like it's kind of taking things from, we get a lot of like female pop music that is like sounds kind of like it was like 2010s, like Katy Perry, empowering kind of stuff, but it has like modern production tricks. But then the lyrics are more like early 2000s, like Black Eyed Peas, like party songs, and it's all just kind of a mishmash of things that it doesn't really have a strong identity. Um, so kind of the question that I think is important to ask is like what tradition or like what almost like what artistic movement are you a part of and what are you building on? Um, and then like what are you adding to it? And that's the way I kind of think about it, is like the first thing is, if you nailed a certain style, and really capture, the essence of that thing, like if you're making a modern pop track, that might get you signed to something, to a library like ours. But it's again those little tweaks, that you add to it, that are what's going to get it actually licensed. And so it's not necessarily about like how am I describing myself in an email to a publisher or whatever. It's more about like knowing or understanding how your track is ultimately going to get licensed. And the better you understand that, I think you'll be able to sort of calibrate what you're doing. Let's see. Man, it just does not want to click onto my next thing. Yep, there it goes. So just kind of some examples, since I'm kind of talking a little bit generally. So like if you imagine if you were really good at making modern pop tracks like Ed Sheeran, and you can nail that kind of style and that kind of composition, and you make a track that sounds like exactly like an Ed Sheeran track, that'll be great. It might be something that we accept, it might not. But what's really probably going to elevate it is like if you think of like something about your voice that sets you apart from him, like just a cooler, more interesting voice. That might be, a little tweak that would be really appealing to me as somebody, reviewing it for the catalog, but ultimately, to the client is what we're looking for. Um, Another example, like you guys have all, I'm sure, heard Billie Eilish's stuff. She has a really unique production style. It's very atmospheric. She has a very like whispery vocal. It's a very dark production, very like warm everything. But her lyrics tend to be a little bit more dark. Um, Maybe, something I would love to hear is like that, but with a little bit more uplifting themes, like a little bit different take lyrically. We have Billie Eilish is somebody that we get tons and tons of submissions trying to emulate that. And they're all like nailing it. But at this point, we are getting hundreds of them. And it's like, I'm not really sure why I would take one over another. And that kind of the effect that has is just like it's hard for me to see it getting licensed because if it doesn't really stick out much to me, it's definitely not going to stick out for a client. Um, Another thing that people do, and again, it's not going to come out. Oh, there we go. So like era specific music, if you were to do that with like modern production, that's always really cool. Um, we'll talk a little bit more on era specific music in the next slide, but hopefully these kind of make sense as like things that are sound interesting and appealing to me and something I might want to hear. Um, and again, just to kind of hammer home this point, like one or two small things is enough. Most people don't have that. So, if you've got everything else going, like don't be afraid to add your own voice or whatever kind of makes you unique about that. People want to hear that more than, if you spend a lot of time um, working on like royalty-free music stuff where that's actually not valued. Um, I think libraries like ours like want to hear that uniqueness maybe a little bit more than you think. Um, okay, trying to get to the next slide. What time we got? Oh, it's already okay. I'm gonna have to get through these next parts fairly quickly. Kind of another spectrum that doesn't come up as much is this idea of tracks being dated sounding or possibly too new sounding. Um, it's kind of self-explanatory there. Again, it's much more common for tracks to sound too dated than too ahead of the curve. Again, probably by 10 to 1. So just kind of something to be aware of. The sweet spot, super simple. Whatever's popular now is always going to be kind of like our top selling stuff. Um, it's very difficult to like anticipate new trends, and some of them, don't always end up landing. So it might not be something that it might be something where you are just trying to kind of replicate what's going on in the charts. Or you might be kind of like trying to hedge your bets where you're like, oh, there's a bunch of new styles out that I want to try out. And maybe one of them will, hit it big. But in general, if you want to play it safe, just listen to the charts. Um, I would say another really big thing is a lot of the artists that I run into just literally don't listen to what's going on in pop music now. Again, like I kind of use this example of Katy Perry. I can't tell you how many submissions I get of people that think that Katy Perry's sound is what current pop music sounds like. So if you're not like I do this once a week with my wife where we if we have a long car trip, we'll just go to Spotify. They have this like top hits playlist. We'll just like listen through the top 50 songs just so we know what's going on. And also it's just fun because, most of it is not my thing and we enjoy just having our commentary on it or whatever, but it's really useful for your career and just kind of understanding how to calibrate your stuff a little bit better. We kind of got into this. Most rock is definitely kind of on the dated side. There isn't really much rock music that is like trending right now. And then on the other side, if it will come up for me, which it will not. Sorry about this. Um, I was talking to an artist trying to get into sync who is like a real young guy. He's like, I don't know, 18 or something like that. And he's an EDM producer who makes this type of music called color bass, which he introduced me to, which is like it's kind of like a few steps beyond dubstep. I haven't there was like dubstep and then a few more movements and now it's color based, which I haven't kept up with. And it was awesome. He's an incredible producer. It's really cool music. You can go listen to it on YouTube, but it's not something that's really landed yet. Um, And so it's kind of on you to figure out, where you're kind of placing, your efforts in terms of this stuff. Okay. Again, we're frozen here. Oh yeah, and then the last thing, I'm just gonna leave it on the screen for now. The other thing to be aware of is just like genre labels mean different things all the time. It's always changing. So, for example, what singer-songwriter meant in the 70s is very different from today. And it's like they're basically different genres of music. Um, Today, like a singer-songwriter could literally be like an R&B singer with, a trap beat under it or something, as opposed to like Carole King in the 70s or something. They're not at all comparable, but we still call them both singer-songwriter. And so it's good to be aware of kind of exactly what you're talking about there. And just to kind of speed through this last section, um, this kind of idea of too broad versus too specific, this mostly applies to lyrics. You guys probably know most of this, but you want to avoid, well, my idea is like you don't necessarily want to avoid this stuff, but you need to know how much to use it and when to use it. So like specific names, places, events, those are all necessarily limiting as I put it out here. Basically, every time you add a reference to something specific, that is going to rule you out in some way for something. So it's really about like looking for that balance of like how much is too much. Um, because again, in my next point here, if you have no specifics in anything, it's too generic. And we're looking for something between those. And we're going to get into this a little bit with the songs we're about to listen to. Um, yeah, having these specific references in the verses is a little bit more acceptable in the choruses, which to me, a chorus is like what the song is literally about. So, if your song's about, my example here, if your song's about New York City, that's one thing. If your song's about Milwaukee, these are different things. Uh, yeah, my point here. Sorry, I'm just really trying to get a handle on all the stuff I wrote here. Yeah, some of these specifics are still broad enough. So there's enough things that are set in New York City that maybe a song about that would be something we would take. Not a lot of stuff set in Milwaukee, which is where I'm from, unfortunately. So a song about that is probably going to be hard for us to use. And again, always think about the potential applications. So really try to have a clear idea of what your song might actually be used for. I think, again, that's something I've been very surprised by when I do listening panels is I will just listen to a song and then ask people like what they think their song would be good for, and they just don't have an answer. And I'm always kind of surprised by that. So if you don't have an answer for that, take 5 minutes and figure it out. And if you're thinking for 5 minutes and you can't come up with anything, you might have identified a problem there. So, yeah. And just kind of main takeaways before we get into the listening. Again, kind of the sweet spot we're looking for. Mostly familiar with one or two small twists. It's a lot more common to be too generic than too unique. I don't reject a lot of songs specifically because they're too original or too wild or whatever. Um, so you might think about erring a little bit more on that side than you think. Know where your music fits in the landscape, know your potential applications. Again, you're looking for more than one application because one is going to be very specific, and it's like, will that opportunity ever come? Maybe not. But if you're like, this song could work for anything, that's probably not true. It's probably not going to work for anything because it's probably too far on that generic side. And again, don't let any of this stop you from making the music you want to make. You know, sync is great, but it's not everything, and music kind of has value in all sorts of different ways. So, whew, okay.
Amazing.
Jordan, were there any questions I could get to?
Yeah, there's one. Someone just asked if would you potentially sign a song if there were parts of the song that were more specific and other parts that were more general, like would you use just certain parts of the song? Would you see the song and think, okay, I could use parts of this, so then would you sign that potentially? Or is that something you that might turn you off?
Yeah, I think so. I think we would sign that. I generally listen through, so it's this is gonna sound harsh, but like I can tell when a song's not gonna work within, there's songs that'll take 2 seconds for me to reject because, within 2 seconds, if the production's there or not, and if it's not, then it's gone. If a song is good and it's, meets most of the things, I will listen mostly through the first chorus. And then I will usually be able to accept it or reject it on that. If I hear something in, say, the verse that sounds like a little too specific, maybe I'll check out the other verses and and I'll try to get a general sense for like if overall it's having this effect that I think will be limiting. But as long as, again, like as long as it's not like the main line of the chorus or something like that, it's probably not going to be like a deal breaker per se. And again, like people might be surprised by maybe we're a little bit more open to like those interesting kind of specific lines than they think. So, I mean, I guess to answer the question, like, yes, we would definitely take something where it's like a part of it has something pretty specific and unique to it.
Cool. There's a couple other questions we can maybe get through quickly.
Yep.
Someone was asking if they could submit a special cover of a special cover of a famous today. I don't know what they're actually asking there. Lily, do you mind clarifying that? Um, I'll go on to Bruce. To submit, I must be a writer, co-writer. It is not sufficient to be producer and publisher with documentation authorizing the pitch. Also don't really know what that.
So I'll actually for all that stuff, let me drop something in the chat. We have this FAQ page that probably has
Oh,
more
cool.
information than you'll ever need
Mhm.
uh, on all these questions, and probably will apply to most other libraries as well. As far as covers, so we are specifically looking for what we call reimagined covers. So we're looking for covers that are significantly different from the original. We're not taking anything that's basically trying to replicate the original. So if you have anything like that, okay, Lily clarified, can we submit a cover of famous song today? Yes, absolutely. Those are, mostly what we're looking for. We have a list of, actually, if you go, I don't know if you guys can see this, but if you go to our submission page, we have this link here, a list of songs that we're looking for covers of.
Cool.
Um,
That's
Kate, that's a great question. Have we checked if the covers are clearable? Right now, we don't really know that. We're kind of taking everything. It's very, very hard to find that information. But our CEO has been going out and talking to all our contacts and kind of getting a sense for like which bands, if they're like major bands, are clearing things. For example, like we have been taking like Beatles covers if they're really awesome, but the Beatles generally are not clearing a whole lot of stuff.
Mm.
Um, Scott for the trailerized versions. So you would never need to get clearance from the original writer publisher. We are representing the master. That responsibility is going to fall on the client who's using it. So at least for us, I can't speak for anything else for anybody else, but you wouldn't need to get clearance for anything like that. Anybody else? You feel free to email me your questions. I want to get to these like listening things.
Yeah, we'll do a
Oh yeah.
ask me anything. So in the creators circle, if you guys have questions, there'll be a thread in there that you can ask follow-up questions. And then also, Dan, if you'd like, we do make disco playlists of submissions from our community, people who are at this call right now, like who come to the
Mhm.
live event. If you want,
Mhm.
we can do that, and then it can just be like a group of submissions that you can access or not, whatever you want to do. There's no obligation or anything around it, but I can drop that link in at the end of the call for everybody, if you're open to that.
Yeah, that sounds great. We'll definitely
Cool.
talk about that after.
Great.
So yeah, I want to get into, let's just kind of listen to some of these tracks. Let me make sure I'm sharing my computer sound. Okay. So these are the three tracks that were submitted. And so I kind of want to just talk about them in terms of the concepts that I've been kind of going over. So this first track is by John Mann. Not sure if he is in the chat, but we're gonna listen to maybe a minute of it and kind of talk about it. Here we go.
I've been through the Darien Gap with a baby strapped to my back, and the sky opening up in every direction. I've been through the jungle for sure, with a hurricane wind at my door. I ain't scared of my own reflection. There, one page at a time of the hill I climbed, I could see where the plot went wrong. But then finally there was a ribbon laid out like a highway in a song.
All right, so we'll stop it there. So I really like this song. I'll explain kind of the things that I like about it is actually some of the things that I think would make it hard to place. First of all, the opening line, I've been through the Darien Gap with a baby strapped to my back. I think this is a really interesting line to kind of talk about this balance lyrically because I don't know, I didn't know what the Darien Gap was. It's some kind of I looked it up and now I forget what it is. It's some kind of like, you know, I want to say it was on a hike or something, like it's some kind of nature element. And that's a specific that I don't think is necessarily limiting. It's maybe not super well placed as the first line in the song. But it's, you kind of know what it is, even though you don't know what it is. And it fits with the mood of the song. But then you add with a baby strapped to my back, and that to me is a little bit where it crosses over into too specific. And you know, if I were to imagine this being used in a TV show, that part of the line might, you know, strike me as odd, unless, again, there's a character that literally has a baby on their back. And again, if that happened, that is going to sound weird because it's like it's just describing what's on screen. So I think that's an interesting line. The rest of it, I think all is fine lyrically. The thing that I wanted to point out about this song, I would say just like having this sort of blurry mix of influences and genres, another kind of form of that is having this mix of emotions where when I listen to the song, I'm not entirely sure what emotion it's going for. It's going for a lot of different things. You know, if I listen to it a few more times, maybe that would be more clear, but it sounds kind of like regretful, but also like, you know, celebrating things he's done. Um, overall it sounds like a little sad to me, but I'm not sure exactly what the intention is. And the fact that I'm not sure about that is probably going to cause some issues. So it does have that kind of issue of being a little bit blurry in how I could see it being used. Um, it is, and so what I was going to say about that is the thing that probably makes it difficult to place, but also as just a music listener and somebody who's enjoying the song, that's something I like about it too, because I like music where there's a lot of ambiguity. That thing that, there's nothing wrong with that objectively. It's just in terms of sync, it's going to have some issues. Um, and then I would say this is a little bit more like structural, but like it's a little hard to tell where the chorus is. There's not a lot of separation between the verse and the chorus. I believe the last part we played is the chorus because we hear it a few times. Um and yeah, I think it's really nice. It does kind of land on the left side of that spectrum that we're talking about, where I wish it had something about um the performances or the style that was a little bit more unique. Um, I think it sounds a little like demo quality. There's a couple parts where the vocal could be a little bit more confident. Um, but it's also like a really nice song. So it's again, like I actually like all these submissions because they're all kind of in this like borderline area where it is kind of about like real little subtle things. I don't know. Um, yeah, I don't know. Hopefully that said something about the song. I'm not sure. Um, only got, I don't know, Jordan, I don't know how long we can go over the hour, but
Totally fine if we go a little over. Some people might have
okay.
to jump off, but yeah, that's totally fine.
Okay, cool. Trying to think if I wrote down anything else about that. Yeah, I mean, I think so like the focus of that song is on the lyrics, and that is where you do have these things that are kind of unique and showing your voice. Um, and it's kind of an interesting way that you wrote the lyrics where it's kind of just a lot of like imagery and phrases, and overall it's a really nice listening experience. It's hard for me to find that sort of clear application for where we would use this song. So yeah, it's a tough one. Next song by Claudio. This is called Perfect Day. So we're gonna listen to a little bit of this. Oh, and by the way, don't mean to like jump off you right off the bat, but just like a very quick note, you don't want to put sound effects in your music like this. Just make a version without it. Because if this is placed in movies or TV, those shows are going to have their own sound effects. Imagine if this song they were trying to place this in like an indoor scene and you've got birds chirping, that kind of thing. So just a quick note there.
Wake up, the sun is shining. Get up, it wants you to chime in. Maybe it even shines for you. Take up whatever you're up to. Set up whatever you need to start and kick off something new. 'Cause it is overdue. Today's a perfect day for this. You won't believe what a treat this is, and no one's gonna stop you on your way. Today's a perfect day for a perfect day.
Okay, really great song. There is a lot of stuff I like about this one. You definitely, if you guys have a chance, you should check out the whole song. It definitely shows like a lot of command of, you know, melody and harmony, that kind of stuff. It's like really well written. There's a ton to like about this one. I think so this one immediately to me strikes me as like it has a very specific application, which is this would be used as like a replacement for one of a few songs. You immediately think of like, wouldn't it be nice? Happy Together, to a lesser extent, maybe like God Only Knows, something like that. It's definitely in this like Beach Boys style. And it's good because you do have a clear path to like how would this song be licensed. It would be somebody coming to us saying we need to replace one of these songs, and then this song would be an easy pick for something like that. um Overall though, I mean it has that going for it. Overall I would say the lyrics again maybe fall a little bit too far on that generic side. I think the chorus, like today is a perfect day for a perfect day, uh, it falls a little bit flat just because it's like there's nothing super interesting about that lyrically. I think the rest of the lyrics are a little bit kind of in that lane where I just wish there was a little bit more interesting imagery or lyric or something like that. I would definitely this is a good example of like there are parts of the song that I think do kind of help give it that uniqueness that I'm looking for. For example, there's I hear in the mix there's like some other instrument, there's like some strings and some horns and stuff. They're a little bit buried. I don't know whether that's because they're like sampled or whatever, but I actually would like to hear those brought out a little bit. That would add a little bit of flavor that I think would help. And I would also consider maybe bringing in a new vocalist on this one. I think the vocal is definitely solid. Um, I don't know. For some reason, I'm hearing it with like a female vocal with you know, a little bit more character in the voice, something like that would really help it. I think overall this song has like really good kind of bones to it, and it's like compositionally, it's really nice. Um, and again, there's just a few tweaks I think that would make it something we could be, you know, confident in. Trying to think if I wrote down anything else. Yeah. So yeah, I like this. I think it does have kind of the difficult part of it, which is that like I do know how it would be used, and so that's kind of the main advantage there. Um, and then just for a couple minutes, we'll move on to this last song by Lionhead's Project. I don't know if this is Morty or Matt or Morty Matt, um, but let's check this one out. we'll stop it there. So yeah, there's a lot of things I like about this one too. I would say the big advantage this one has is it's very clear what the emotion is, what the song is about, what's like kind of being communicated. Um, this idea of like lost time, that's something I think kind of that does kind of fit in the middle. It's not, the most generic kind of main phrase, but it's also not too specific. You can use this idea of lost time in a lot of different ways. And so in that sense, I think it's doing a lot of good stuff. I think the part I want to highlight in terms of what we've been talking about is the genre or the style. Um, it does kind of run into this issue that I mentioned where it's a blend of a few different things that's going to make it very hard to pitch. It's kind of this pop ballad. It's sort of unclear if it's supposed to sound modern or like something from the 70s or 60s or whatever. It also has this instrumentation that sort of suggests like a Latin thing, but it's not really doing any like you wouldn't call this a Latin pop song. It just like has some Latin instruments on it. So that kind of almost creates a little bit of confusion about what type of song it is or what it would be used in, because like if we had a song that was like set in Latin America, this wouldn't come off as authentic enough to use in a scene like that, but also it has that very specific flavor that would make it difficult to be used in other things. So it's sort of this like, again, this sort of blurry mix of things where I'm not sure what the request is that would match up with this song. So like, I mean, the closest artist I could think of would be like, and I'm not super familiar with these songs, but like a ballad by like Santana or something, but it doesn't really sound like that. I'm not really exactly sure what it sounds like. So again, like these are things that are definitely cool to listen to. Like as a listener, I enjoy that it's this mix, but those are the problems that it's going to cause if you end up submitting it places, and those are kind of the difficulties that you're gonna run into with this one. But yeah, again, there's like a lot of good stuff going on with it. I like you do a good job with like the build of it. The melody kind of keeps, it starts at this narrow place and then kind of keeps expanding. You keep adding to it. I think like structurally it's really good, and that's what you want to be doing with, most music for sync. Yeah, I think there's just, things that'll be tough to work with about it, but that's just what it is. It doesn't mean anything about the song itself necessarily. So that's all I got. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I love having examples too, because it's just nice for after the chat about advice and information, and then actually seeing like real examples is really helpful. So thanks for doing that. That was so fun and such a great
Yeah, and I'll
workshop.
definitely be around on that AMA thing.
Cool, cool,
So
cool.
leave all your questions there.
Great.
That'll be easy for me to keep track of.
Also,
Amazing. Thank you so much.
I have a question, Dan, before we go.
Mhm.
That was a very helpful slideshow. Would you be able to share that on AMA? Ask Me Anything?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you
Thank
for our
you.
listeners. Yes. Thank you, everybody, for coming today. Thank you so much, Dan. That was so informative. I shared
Yeah,
your
it
link,
was.
Crucial Instagram, and your website, and you guys have the rest of the information from today. You can always rewatch if you missed something and came late.
Yeah.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Great.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks, Dan, again for putting that together and spending the time on this. Appreciate it so much. Thanks, everyone.
See you later.
Have a good day.